Last year, working with Jadu, I realised for the very first time the scale of the digital accessibility problem that a wide range of consumers and citizens face. Researching and writing the white paper Driving a Digital Accessibility Culture brought home to me the issues that some in our society face to be on an equal footing in a digital world. But more than that, we will all face digital accessibility issues, whether through aging, illness, or perhaps an accident. As the paper and this discussion will reveal, so many in society are excluded from digital essentials, such as dealing with civic services, paying for goods, or accessing the latest information. It is rightly deemed wrong to exclude the disabled from a building, but we prevent access to the digital realm. That is bad for business and bad for society. So to discuss developing a new digital accessible culture, so please welcome my panel, Robin Christopherson, Head of Digital Inclusion at AbilityNet, Suraj Kika, CEO and founder of Jadu, and James Jacobs, Accessibility Lead at Jadu. Welcome, gentlemen. I'd like to begin this discussion by asking, why has the digital world fallen behind the physical world in terms of accessibility? And Robin, may I start with you, please?
Wow. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. Real pleasure. I think it's what you talked about. You know, we all know about the physical world and, you know, how embarrassing, how inappropriate, how terrible from a brand point of view would be to have a line of people who, for whatever reason, weren't able to get into your store or your office building, etc. We can obviously think of people in wheelchairs or with mobility problems where you've got big steps up into your building rather than a ramp. And that is, in less tangible terms, exactly what we're talking about when it comes to your digital estate as well. So your websites and your apps, etc., your comms, all of these things are locking people out, are excluding people. And I guess because it's not quite so tangible, not quite so obvious, it's fallen down the priority list. And it's all about making people aware that digital is obviously as important as the physical world. And in some cases more so. We saw it with COVID. People were restricted. They were in their own homes. And in some cases were going hungry, literally, because they couldn't order food deliveries online because of inaccessibility. They weren't able to interact with public services, commercial services, etc. And that's still a very real situation for me as a blind person. I face frustration and exclusion on a daily basis online, not through kind of malice, etc., but through neglect and not enough sort of foresight that people with disabilities and impairments and accessibility needs are going to be visiting their services all the time. So yeah, it's kind of making people aware. They should obviously be already. It's been a legal requirement since 2003. And winning hearts. And we can talk about numbers a little bit later on. But yeah, it's, I guess, because people just need to be that little bit more aware that it's a reality for millions of people.
James, Robin used a fantastic term there, the digital estate. Why is there this gap between, as Robin pointed out, we understand the physical, but we're falling behind on the digital?
Yeah, I totally agree with the points that Robin raised. I think there's obviously the visibility issue that Robin's covered, where the barriers that are in place that prevent people from accessing simple things. For example, you know, my background is in development. You know, things as simple as a button not being coded correctly may prevent someone with a screen reader from using it, or speech recognition software. So, yeah, I think it's a little bit hidden. Is digital accessibility as opposed to physical accessibility? I think these. From a developer point of view, there's the kind of the education side of it as well. Lack of awareness, perhaps, with organizations and designers and developers. Typically speaking, a developer will be charged with producing a block of work, code, functionality, etc. And if they're not aware of how to make that accessible, they're just going to focus on how to deliver that piece of work as best as possible. And you know, a lot of developer training and education doesn't include accessibility. So they'll teach you how to, you know, if it's front-end development, they'll teach you how to build a website, you know, how to build a database, how to style things nicely. But very rarely do they cover the actual, the accessibility, how to make your code accessible. And I think there's also the regulation side of it as well. I think it's very much driven by legislation, certainly in the UK and the US. A lot of countries have quite defined requirements when it comes to the public sector, but perhaps a little bit lacking when it comes to the private sector, which is, in my opinion, where the most room is for improvement.
So as James raised an interesting point there about the development process, the commissioning process, call it what you're, is digital accessibility therefore often an afterthought? And that is because it's perhaps considered a tech problem for IT.
Yeah, 100%. I think it goes much deeper actually, because it's at the end of the day, it's a leadership problem. If you think of I suppose the whole realm of it in terms of layers, the bottom layer is capability and skills. So as James referred to, making sure it's baked into your development, sort of not just your process, but your core skill set. But also above that, it's culture, and having a culture of accessibility is I suppose paramount, really. And then right above that, at the very highest level, it's education, sort of in leadership, and it's leaders who instill culture into organizations and maintain that culture. Leaders are the keeper of culture, I suppose. And if accessibility is seen as a bolt-on or as a compliance, and not as a fundamental part of your culture, inclusion, not just inclusion, but making sure that everyone can access everything across a broad range of abilities and disabilities. If you're not doing that from a leadership perspective, I think the barriers then do become sort of IT problems, and then you're bolting things in, you're remediating, you're fixing things after the fact, and that becomes much more expensive, much harder to achieve, and it's almost sort of chasing a dragon, because you'll never be able to catch up. Every time standards or sort of web standards change, you then have to do this whole piece of work to understand what those changes are, and that's a cycle that technology has, I suppose, found itself in this continuous loop of test fix, when actually the real fix is in leadership, and it's really having an understanding of the business benefits of accessibility, because those aren't really talked about enough. We're all talking about, well, in North America particularly, it's about litigation. In the UK, it's really about, well, it has to be accessible as a tick box exercise, and it's very easy to forget about the human beings at the end of it. But also now, the way technology is shifting, accessibility has ceased to become just a problem of humans being able to access everything, and it's now about machines being able to access everything as well.
Can I come in on?
Yes, please. I'm going to come to you, so please go for it.
I mean, I totally agree with everything that Suraj says there. Everyone, there's a lot of passion within organizations. There are lots of individuals often that really want to do accessibility and do it well, go beyond compliance, get some end users involved to make sure that they are not only sort of technically compliant to WCAG, but also kind of bridge that gap between technical compliance and real life usability for end users. So there's loads of people that are really passionate about it, but they haven't got the support. The organization hasn't lifted themselves out of that ad hoc, reactive, almost firefighting, as Suraj was saying, particularly in an agile development scenario, that sort of cycle of test and fix because it was broken, because accessibility wasn't baked in. So to Suraj's point about leadership, that's absolutely vital. And any maturity model that you look at, and we're strong advocates of a maturity model approach to examining where you are today within your organization. And it works for an organization of any size and complexity. We've done it, our particular flavor, the digital accessibility maturity model, which you can do free, guys. You can download it today. Shines a light into every corner of what you do, from vision, leadership, strategy, capability, tooling, training, procurement, all the different processes and documentation, etc. to help lift you out of this reactive, informal, ad hoc scenario, to shift left and make sure that accessibility is part of people's day job. They feel comfortable with it. There's sufficient resourcing and support to make sure that it just happens and that it isn't this bolt-on activity, which when push comes to shove, if it's bolted on, then it can be dropped off. I wish sometimes it was given as much priority as a technical issue, because if there's a technical issue in the UI of a website, for example, where a particular button isn't working, then obviously that's going to be fixed overnight, or certainly in the, depending on how critical it is, the agile 2 weeks or whatever might be foreshortened and there'd be an overnight, bug fix. But just because it doesn't affect everybody, it only affects, 15 to 20% of the users potentially, then it's deprioritized and potentially never gets fixed at all. So yeah, I think that that's really, really important. I'd also like to mention, just in passing, that we're not actually talking about accessibility being primarily for disabled people, that 15 to 20%, depending on which country or which research or numbers you look at. It's literally for every user, particularly when it comes to mobile. And we know that we're living in a mobile first world. The average traffic to any given website, Google says, is 60+% from mobile. So it's definitely a mobile first world. Every single user using their mobile phone is an extreme computer user, an extreme digital user. So you're juggling your phone one-handed, bumpy bus, baby in the other hand, or whatever it might be, noisy cafe, you need to use, captions, or if you're watching a sneaky video in your lectures at university with the sound off, bright sunny day, small sheet of, shiny reflective glass, etc. I could go on and on. There are parallels with every single area of impairment. We're all sliding up and down that spectrum, that sliding scale of impairment on a minute by minute basis. So, it's definitely not, if you're talking a numbers game, just for disabled people. It's actually for every single user. The RNIB did some brilliant research a while ago where they got a group of visually impaired users and a control group of able-bodied, unimpaired users, and they pointed them at a number of websites. And obviously, the sites that were compliant, that were more accessible, were easier to use by the visually impaired group. But actually, that wasn't the most interesting finding. It was the control group were able to perform tasks on those sites that were at least single A compliant, on average 35% more quickly. And what UX guy would not get a 35% usability bonus overnight for every single user? That's what accessibility offers. And accessibility is pushing in the same direction. There's no friction between accessibility and UX, particularly on mobile when it's extreme computing. So yeah, that was a lot more talking than I should have done in an equal conversation, but I feel so passionate about it that, if you're talking numbers, this is actually for every single person. And we just really would like organizations to finally decide, hey, we're going to prioritize this. We're going to take all the passion within the organization. We're going to formalize it, organize it into an accessibility network, champions network within your organization. We're going to appoint an accessibility lead who reports to the exec sponsor. We're going to find that exec sponsor who reports to the board on a regular basis. It should be a standing item at the senior team level. And we're going to do it properly. So yeah, rant over.
Not at all. The sliding scale of impairment, that is a great takeaway for anyone. James, Robin very much described so much of the end user issues there. And Suraj brought up some interesting points there about the business processes of development. And with your developer's hat on, if you're going back and doing accessibility as an afterthought, then you're just making scruffy code, which inevitably ends up with a scruffy interface for the end user, whatever vertical market that is in. So there's kind of that's just poor practice, isn't it? And because it's often an afterthought and a tech problem.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's just so many dangers with retrospectively trying to bolt accessibility on, from unforeseen circumstances, from other fixes, and And just the sheer scale of what you might have to do. Some websites are inherently, and web applications inherently unaccessible so it wouldn't actually be possible to just bolt it on at the end. So it really has to, and I know we've said this before, but it really has to be considered at every stage of the product life cycle. Design, prior to that, user research, design, development, tests, go live, user feedback, iteration. It's not a one and done task. It's something that is a journey, and there's always kind of room for improvement. But yeah, tacking things on at the end, you may be able to fix one bug, but yeah, it's going to be a nightmare from a developer point of view, and probably result in unforeseen issues as well.
Yeah, right. We touched on it briefly at the very top of the show, but we are seeing more regulation. It's predominantly focused on the public sector, but across Europe and the USA, there are more regulations coming that will cover all vertical markets. Is this going to, Robin, I'll come to you first if I may, is this going to help, or is it sort of bolting the stable door after the horse has left?
No, it's absolutely going to help. So I am a fan of legislation with teeth. And I believe in the juiciest carrots and the knobbliest sticks that will help on both sides of the argument. And Suraj, I'm sure, in the public sector particularly, is very aware of the impact that PS Bar has had, really made public sector bodies sit up and listen, saw those milestones coming up, those deadlines for the different levels of compliance, in some cases whizzing by, but still the level of activity in the public sector was orders of magnitude higher than it was before. Not that the public sector was a laggard in accessibility per se, but, it really, really helped. And I really would like to see real legislation with teeth coming here in the UK, as per the EAA over there on the continent. A really good example, I interviewed a fantastic person from Diffie, that's the department in Norway, who obviously aren't in the EU, but they've had this legislation in place for ages, and they would proactively monitor, audit, and fine companies in all sectors that were inaccessible. And she gave me a brilliant example of SAS, that's their local national airline in Norway, great name. And they were audited and shown to be inaccessible. So they were given a year, which is very generous, to sort out their problems. They didn't do it. After that, they had an equivalent of a €10,000 a day fine, and they sorted it in a week. So it's all about the incentive, I think, and numbers talk. And we would love those numbers to be around the business case and the upside, but they can also be about the fines as well. And we've seen that with PS Bar having real teeth. So I would absolutely love there to be both carrots and sticks, and the sticks being actually wielded and not just like a limp twig that just is hanging out there and expecting, civil cases, private claims against organizations, which are always problematic and can actually be, detrimental to the individual who might have to pay costs, etc. So yeah, it's a complicated picture. I'm not saying that we should go to be like the US where litigation is around every corner, but having teeth in a law, I think, is really important. Otherwise, it's limp and ineffective.
And Suraj, you deal with so many different organizations, local authorities, and what have you in all markets. Are you finding that the regulation is helping them?
100%. I mean, what I love about the public sector, both in the UK and the US, is that it's already baked in to procurement. And I think more so in the UK than it is in the US. And I think the US has probably got a few years to go, but it's only a few years. It's a shame that things have to be driven by, sticks, but that's how it all starts, right? So in the UK, what I love, so for example, what the GDS are doing, the Government Digital Service, I think what they're doing is they're taking the lead in auditing. They've got a highly experienced, trained and skilled bunch of people who really understand why accessibility is important. And, they're holding to account. they're holding departments and even local authorities to account for web accessibility. In the US, we work at state, local, and federal government levels, and it varies from state to state. So, for example, Colorado, California, they're very progressive when it comes to accessibility, and so it was also baked into procurement there as well. But usually these things are highlighted by big, expensive lawsuits, right? And there's some organizations who track the number of lawsuits over on a monthly basis. I think it's Usable Net, and there's a huge steep incline in the numbers of cases, not just for breaches of accessibility, but also for the use of superficial technologies like overlays, for example. Again, it's one of those band-aids that organizations try and put in to try and stem the bleeding, to as quickly as possible mitigate the risk of litigation. And it's a shame we even get there. And I think it's very simple. If we stop seeing accessibility as a mandatory compliance that we have to do, and start seeing it as a business benefit that we want to do, not just because it's the right thing, but also because it is the thing. I mean, if you look at what's happening in technology right now, it's not human beings necessarily that will be accessing your content, large language models as well. And the way that technology is accelerating like nothing ever before, since the microprocessor was invented, since computers were put into homes and into our hands, nothing has moved faster than the advent of artificial intelligence. And it's accelerated now. It's been around for a long time, but it's only now that it's become consumer level. Everyone is using ChatGPT to summarize documents and read stuff. I really like the way artificial intelligence is now converging with hardware. And I think that's a really interesting journey. A couple of things that have happened recently, like Apple have made the Vision Pro a new immersive experience into how you experience not just the internet but the whole digital world. But also Disney have created the I think they call it the Holotile, which basically enables a physical movement within a virtual world. So it's basically a mat that responds to movement. And you combine all of these technologies together, and you've got a real shift in the way we experience digital and the way we experience simple things like booking a flight, for example. As Robin said, that's a commercial service that everyone should be able to access and be able to access it in real time. And so accessibility from a leadership perspective needs to be thought of as not just a must have or need to have, but as just something that enables business to move faster. Whether you're a public service or whether you're a commercial service like an airport, for example. We worked with the Highland and Islands airports a few years ago on redesigning their website. And it's the first time I've ever seen a brief that starts off with our vision is to become AAA compliant. That was the first line in the brief that they gave technology providers to bid. We won the bid. We delivered what we think was the world's first. Whether it's AAA compliant now, I don't know, because it's all about content, isn't it? But I mean, it was when it went live, it was independently tested and AAA compliant. But it's that level of vision, that level of thought leadership that has come from the top down, from the leadership who've said, this has got to be our highest priority. And the business benefits now are way more than just accessibility. They're about making your business accessible to the world. And the world now is not necessarily just human beings. It's artificial intelligence. It's machines that need to be able to access and parse through that content quickly.
We spoke
Absolutely.
to them for the report, and it was fascinating, wasn't it? Actually, airports physically are quite good examples of good accessibility, aren't they? Big yellow signage everywhere, clear fonts, ramps, etc. and yet their digital realm had not until that project began caught up, and now it has. And what a great example. So, Robin, you had a point.
Yeah, absolutely agreeing with everything that Suraj has just said. I mean, I think of the different ages of computing, the computer, let's call it in the 80s, put the power of technology into people's, homes or hands. And then when the internet came along, obviously that made all the difference. When you're offline now, you look at your computer and think, what can I do with this thing? I'm offline. I don't know. So yeah, it's all about connectivity, etc. And then in the noughties, you've got the advent of the mobile phone, real kind of proliferation, and that took all the power of the computer with you wherever you go, and it added loads more sensors, camera, accelerometer, GPS, all these different things, which particularly when it comes to impairment, when your own senses might, some of those might not be working, to have those sensors in those devices to kind of help compensate. I mean, I use the camera on my mobile phone probably more than you guys, and certainly more than people might credit for a blind person, because I'm using them all the time to recognize text, objects, really fine-grained analysis of what's around me, certainly thanks to GPT and equivalents these days. And then the third age would be what we would call ambient computing, which is where technology is kind of all around you, and you don't necessarily even know where it is, what shape it is, to interact with it. You just talk to the air, which in effect is a voice prompt, isn't it? When it comes to smart speakers, for example, you don't know what will respond. It might be the Echo, it could be, your phone or your watch, depending on who you invoked. And that, brought the next level of usability or ease of use or kind of inclusion, because a lot of people would still find, using mobile phones and apps, etc., challenging, particularly if you're older and you still need to interact with, public services, etc., get information. So, even though the UI was distilled down so much more, simplified to its essence when it comes to mobile, just think of the contrast between that and just being able to talk to the air or whatever device, is to hand, and that voice or text prompt with some real smarts behind it has got so much potential. And as Suraj was saying, we don't know what the UI or the IO of the future will be. Maybe it won't be the GUI. Obviously, the GUI is not going away. But, the idea of going through steps which require lots of clicks or key presses, in my case, to book a flight would seem so archaic when you've got this agent, this virtual assistant with real agency who could do the whole process for you. And Suraj was alluding to, gadgets that kind of have this capability built in. I'm thinking of the Rabbit that was certainly got the most, I think, publicity in the press from CES recently, which not only has an LLM in it, but also has an LAM, which is the first time I'd heard of that, a large action model, which, we think that AI is brilliant for creating content and pictures and now video and music and all that sort of thing, summarizing information, doing research online for us. But it kind of stopped there. But with large action models, it can utilize all the APIs that are out there into different services. It can have hooks into everything, IFTTT, etc. But not only that, sites like a flight booking site, which doesn't have necessarily an API that it can hook into, it can look at that web page, it can understand like a human would, interpret what the thing to click on would be to book the flight, can navigate through the date picking, the destination, departure, all that stuff, knows about your credit card details, knows about your preferences, and can actually do all of that for you kind of hands-on in the browser or in the app. So that large action model concept, I think, as Suraj was saying, spells a new potential future of IO for people for whom, digital exclusion is still a reality. For me, going to any given airline website, it's not a given at all that I'll be able to fulfill the process. I might even be shut out at the very beginning with a captcha to even set up an account or whatever it might be. Tabbing to a checkbox which says I'm not a robot is a very robotic way of doing it. And 9 times out of 10, I am a robot when I've tabbed to it and just hit the spacebar, because that's actually got like a little area around the text box, the tick box and the text label, which looks for the mouse coming towards the tick box with variations in its path, because that's a human way of moving a mouse, etc., etc. So yeah, I'm a robot when it comes to things like that most of the time. And then the audio capture that I'm given as an alternative is hugely garbled. So, because that's an AI arms race, isn't it? Because the better they get with Whisper and, a API for accessing really accurate transcripts of really quite garbled, meetings, etc., will obviously be able to crack that audio capture more and more effectively. So it has to get more and more garbled, etc. So yeah, similarly with graphical capture images, challenges, etc. So yeah, really, really interesting times. In danger of speaking too much, though, I'd like to throw it open to you guys about other possible uses of AI to remediate accessibility on the dev side, James, but also in the hands of end users, maybe to recognize unlabeled buttons and stuff like that when the developers haven't considered accessibility.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, the applications from the developer side of things for AI. From what I see at the moment, I don't think we're anywhere near AI being able to deliver accessible code. If you've ever asked ChatGPT, for example, to supply you with a markup for HTML for a basic login form, it gets it a little bit right, but quite wrong. Misuse of things like ARIA and everything else. So I don't think it's there yet. I think probably the immediate benefit will be in things like guided tests. So where AI can guide someone that perhaps isn't familiar with absolutely everything that you need to test when you're auditing a site or you're testing for best practices in accessibility. So I think things like that, guided tests, are really good. Automated AI magic remediation, I don't feel like we're there yet, potentially in the future, but AI, and I'm certainly no expert on AI, but my understanding is that LLMs are only as good as the data that they're modeled on. And these LLMs need massive amounts of quality data, which in terms of web accessibility isn't quite there yet. So the data that they're being fed has issues. If you look at the WebAIM 1 million results, they basically look at the top 100, so top million homepages, the most popular homepages on the web, and I think 96% of them had accessibility issues. So I don't think we're quite there yet with AI. Could be wrong, no doubt in the far future. But I think the application for AI in assistive tech, and we've talked about this already, from what I see, and obviously Robin, you'll know a lot more than I do, but I think it's massive. We're already seeing things like Apple Personal Voice, where you can store your own voice for the future using AI. So, for example, if you have some sort of condition where you may lose the ability to speak, you can store your voice for use with assistive technology. I volunteer on the Be My Eyes app.
Nice.
And they have. They have. I've obviously never used it because I'm only coming at it from being a volunteer. But they have the Be My AI now, don't they? Yep. Where you can take a picture and AI describes what's in the picture and everything else, which I think is fantastic, because a lot of the calls I get on Be My Eyes is to help people that perhaps can't have visual impairments, that perhaps can't read things like cooking instructions on boxes and things like that. So immediate impact there from AI. And the things that we've seen in the last couple of weeks with, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, is it Sora? The Sora videos, where you have these like incredibly cinematic, almost like Hollywood style, high definition videos just from a paragraph of text. Like, absolutely amazing. But then I think from the accessibility point of view, how long is it going to be until we can feed a transcript to an AI and have like it spit out a fully signed video, British Sign Language, American Sign Language. So I think there's so many exciting potential applications around the assistive technology. Not sure we're there from a developer point of view. Got things like Copilot, intelligent suggestions when it comes to coding, but as to actually spitting out accessible code, I don't think we're there yet.
I think it's to your point, James. I think the pace at which things are moving now in every realm for artificial intelligence and large language models, I think it's only a question of time, maybe months. You could probably count it in months. And with the, ChatGPT OpenAI gives you the ability to build your own custom GPTs in the user interface, right? So you don't have to be a developer to do that. So you can train your own models. And that area is becoming more non-technical, more low code, more in the hands of business users. We're working with West Northants Council right now on and AWS for the special education needs service, to be able to provide assistance, like real-time assistance on evaluation of applications. These are psychologists being able to parse through huge volumes of documents so they can get help to young people who need it faster. And that is a fundamental problem. It's not just nationwide, it's a global problem. Being able to process the backlog of information quickly, and that's all about training data. The art of the success of a project like that in special education needs is being able to train a model specifically so it can solve those problems and be an assistant to a psychologist to be able to parse through a 50-page, special education needs application. Similarly, for developers to be able to understand what's going on a machine, like Star Trek has been fundamental in predicting the way technology moves forward. And the one thing that hasn't happened yet is the removal of the keyboard in place of voice prompts. And to your point, Robin, I think inevitably we're going that way. If you look at the way technology and big technology firms that drive the whole digital world is leading. Yesterday, I saw announced that Apple have withdrawn the $10 billion investment in automated cars, so electric cars, and shifting all of that to the development of their own large language models. So I think it's not just consumer grade technology now, and because of that mass adoption of artificial intelligence, I think we'll see it moving at a absolutely lightning pace, and it will affect all areas of technology, from filmmaking through to accessibility, how we interface with computers. We're all so addicted to using mobile devices. It's very distracting. There's too much choice. I love the idea of large action models becoming, the Rabbit device is the first version of that device, right? So it's going to be the worst possible version of it.
Yep.
Just the way not just developers interface with computers, like DevOps, for example, they've been using Emacs and the command line, since the very early days of computers, and they still are. Because
we could be going back to the prompt being the main interface.
I think we're already there, Robin. Yeah. I think, to help you write a strategy document or, read a long article or, summarize information, right the way through to helping you make decisions in business. I don't know many business leaders who don't use ChatGPT, even Sly on the side secretly as their co-pilot for running their organizations. I know I use it every day, and I know everyone I've spoken to uses it every day or at least on a regular basis. And that kind of adoption is rarely seen in technology at that pace.
An example like Apple one are convergent as well, aren't they? In that, yes, Apple are pulling out the electric car, but actually by developing the LLM, it'll actually move the transportation change and so many other technologies, because as we all know, history of technology is always about things collapsing in on one another and delivering a better outcome as one.
And it's that convergence, isn't it? And all we need to do now is make sure that the technology we develop is accessible. And it's such a simple thing, it's such a simple notion, and it really is just education. It comes back to those three layers. For people who build the internet, it's skills. For the organizations that need to be accessible, it's about culture and about understanding your level of maturity, leveraging an organization like AbilityNet to help you with that. and then just putting a plan into place, right? And then for leadership, that sort of final tier, it really is just understanding the business benefits. And I think artificial intelligence, that convergence of technology into devices, and the rapid pace of technology shift that's going on right now, consumer level technology shift, has got to, I mean, it's a no-brainer for any leader to be able to make sure they're readying their organizations for that. And it literally is just a simple answer, prioritize accessibility, and you're making things accessible to humans and to machines.
To bring all those topics together, if I may, one of the things that all business leaders are talking about a great deal at the moment is, how do I get to be AI? How am I using generative AI? And actually, this is an opportunity, isn't it? That accessibility is part of enabling your organization to be an AI-enabled business. James, is that a correct summary? Am I right there?
Yes, I think Suraj hit it on the head with his last line there, that when you create an accessible content, it's for everyone, humans and non-humans. So yeah, AI, forgive me, I had a little bit of lag there and I lost half the question, so I'm trying to wing it. So, so maybe we can edit this bit out. Sorry, could you repeat the question, sir?
Absolutely. So as all business leaders are telling me that, we want to become an AI-enabled business, we want to be using generative AI, and building on what Robin and Suraj have just been sharing, to get to there, actually good accessibility will enable your business to become an AI-enabled business. Am I right in that summary?
Yeah, 100%. I think Suraj hit it on the head with you are creating accessible content for everyone, humans and non-human, and how content is surfaced via AI. If that content to start with is accessible, then depending on the mechanism that's used to dispense the information through AI, as long as that's accessible, then yeah, 100%. Be really interested to hear Robin's thoughts on that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think accessibility is a massive lever in making your content more SEO optimized. We did a brilliant webinar with Google on the overlap between SEO and accessibility. Spoiler, it's so yeah, if your content's machine readable, if your content's readable for a range of input and output devices, in my case from the keyboard, images, I need to be able to access those effectively, then it's going to be much more indexable and understandable for a robot of any flavor, however smart, and they'll be getting smarter and smarter all the time, will be indexing and understanding and kind of processing that content. So yeah, accessibility is at the heart of not only making it more inclusive for humans, but also for robots and AI of the future as well. Just very briefly, I mean, Suraj was talking there about, in effect, expert systems. And I want to flag that these GPTs that were announced by OpenAI a few months ago, if there's one takeaway, it's that go and explore these GPTs, because they are in real terms a turnkey solution. They're incredibly easy to implement. You get round the issues of the variability of the quality of the data and the biases, etc., that the internet represents. It's a very, complicated place, the internet, because you just point it at your own corpus of information. Whether, it's an expert system in Lisp, point it at all the manuals in Lisp, including all the, you might have a component library of accessible components that you've already signed off, bung those in there. It's a bucket, and this will then be the ultimate, whatever it's going to be, code expert system for creating accessible code in whichever platforms and languages that you use within your organization. Ditto, use it for all of the content within your organization, and the Teams Copilot, the M365 Copilot will just look at the corpus of information that your organization has. For each individual user, it is restricted to the content that you have permissions to view and then edit necessarily. So, there's really important factors here about the corpus of information that you point it at, And the fact that those systems that I've been talking about do not then share the output of your transactions or your operations with the large language model generally. So these expert systems, in the form of GPTs or Microsoft's Copilots, are really, really powerful. So definitely go away and look at that. Leverage the power of LLMs, but locally with your own defined, data set. And then that will get around a lot of the problems of bias, hallucinations, incorrect code, etc. I'm not saying that it's going to be able to write all your code for you going forward, but it will certainly help in making sure that it's got a better data set that it's pulling from. So yeah, really, really important. AI is definitely going to be at the heart of everything going forward. As Suraj was saying, they've shifted their focus, and that's quite a chunk of money into AI, because they're realizing that they haven't got as strong a story and potentially as strong a product or set of products in that area as the other big tech companies. So yeah, watch this space. Very briefly, Suraj mentioned earlier about AI being used to remediate in the browser. And I would want to flag that there are broadly two camps of browser plugins that can help with accessibility. Those that claim to be a silver bullet and mean that you don't have to make your sites compliant. Avoid those with an absolute passion. And then those like Browse Aloud and Recite Me, for example, that just provide an extra level of usability when it comes to how the UI is presented, etc. Some other functionality for people with dyslexia, with reading capabilities, that sort of thing. But they require compliance of the code. So there are two flavors there. Avoid those that purport to use AI as a silver bullet, and you don't have to worry. It takes the problem out of your hands. We might get there, as we've been talking about earlier, but we're certainly not there now.
It's interesting, Robin, because I 100% agree with that. I mean, there's a lot of snake oil being sold at scale.
Yeah.
So there are very well funded, like billion-dollar funded organizations now in startup mode, sort of unicorn businesses that are purporting to be that silver bullet, and there's no silver bullet. Right? It's like culture. How do you define culture? You can't, there's no special ingredient or no seminar or course you can go on that helps a leader define a culture inside an organization. It's through hard work and through planning and strategy, and investment in people. And so Jadu is on a mission to become the world's most accessible digital platform. We're absolutely fanatical about it, but you don't have to be fanaticists like we are at Jadu about accessibility to bake that into your culture. You just got to understand the business benefit. And so any advice I would give a startup right now, if you're in technology and you're building an AI startup, for example, and there's many of those, then just put it in right at the beginning, right? Make sure all your developers are trained. Reach out to an organization like AbilityNet to understand what your maturity, where you are on that maturity model, where you are on that scale, and what work you need to do, where you need to make your investments. And it is literally down to an investment in people. And if you're in charge of a large organization, I suppose the one thing that's in common with Jadu and AbilityNet is we both work with very large organizations. If you're in charge of a large organization, if you're the CEO or you're an executive director or you're on the board of directors, then it really is just about educating yourself and understanding what is happening in technology right now with artificial intelligence and the adoption of AI. And how does that dovetail into accessibility? And it's really just that access to all message. You build it for one, and you build it for many.
Earlier
Absolutely.
in the conversation, the Web Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, was raised, and I believe there's been some changes there. So for people tuning in who maybe have heard that but are not aware, could we quickly sort of explain some of those changes and what they mean? Don't know who wants to take that.
Happy to.
Yeah, but no, it's all right. Fire away, Robin.
No. Develop it, right? Unless you want me to.
I mean, I guess, yeah, I'm happy. I guess I can talk about it from the developer-ish point of view, and Robin, you could definitely have more context there. So, so the final version of WCAG 2.2 was published as a W3C recommendation, which basically means that's the version of WCAG the W3C recommend people use in October 2023, so just last year, and that added, I think it was 9 new success criteria. So how WCAG is structured, they have multiple success criteria. There's 70, I can't remember off the top of my head, 70 odd, and they all set sometimes quite prescriptive technical requirements, sometimes a little bit vaguer technical requirements. Obviously, it depends on the technologies used and everything, but essentially added 9 new success criteria which focus on improving accessibility for people with cognitive, mobility and vision impairments. So it added to WCAG 2.1, which was the kind of big deal for PS Bar back in 2018. So it is quite a shift for public sector, because they now have to adopt WCAG 2.2. And we're already seeing quite a lot of our customers embrace 2.2, push towards it, and try and push kind of beyond just the AA level as well. So pushing towards that AAA level into that best practice realm. Yeah, I think that's it from what I could add. Robin, I'm sure you'll be able to add.
You did a good job there. I think to summarize, it kind of adds a bit more of the human to the compliance requirements. So, it's about user experience, etc. Some of the sort of test criteria means that you need to get a bit more, down and dirty when it comes to using the different technologies that people with impairments use, ideally wielded by them. I know that's, not always easy to do, but we are strong proponents of getting people with lived experience involved in the testing process, ideally all the way through, not just at UAT. So yeah, I think that was a brilliant summary. In fear of plugging another webinar that we did recently, we did cover WCAG 2.2 and what it means for you. We covered the new criteria and demonstrated how you can test for them and what they look like, what compliance looks like in practice. So yeah, we have a webinar on it as well if you want to just search for AbilityNet webinar WCAG 2.2. But yeah, it's encouraging. 3.0, who knows when that will come out, but that will be a massive leap. And that again will be really putting the kind of end user at the heart of the process as well, because there's a general recognition that technical compliance can only get you so far. And who knows what role AI will play in compliance against 3.0 in the future, or even 2.2 next year. Who knows? Things are moving fast.
Just to add to that as well, something I missed, especially for public sector bodies, is that under PSBAR, obviously, you get audited from time to time from the GDF monitoring team, and they are auditing based on the 2.2 requirements from October this year. So still time to get into 2.2, still time to fix what you need to. Might be a good time to commission an external audit of your site to find any issues. And I think what I really liked about 2.2, kind of from a technical point of view, is that you're starting to see some requirements that were previously AAA, so kind of harder to meet, more best practice, come into the AA requirements. Which is encouraging, because I know there's sometimes people take the view of, it's AAA, we'll leave that, whereas we should be pushing towards AAA and into that best practice land. So yeah, great to see some AAA related criteria at a AA level in 2.2.
There's also a whole plethora of really great dev tools available, for developers to be able to test their code and make sure before anything gets pushed to live that it's properly compliant and works in the way it should work. So DQ, for example, I know AbilityNet work with DQ. We also know DQ well. We work with them too. They've got this amazing set of tools, some free, some professional tools. Axe Dev Tools, for example, I mean, most development teams in the world probably use AXDev tools to test their code, or they should certainly. And that is definitely a question that any leader can go and ask their organization. Are we using DQ's AXDev tools to test against? There's a whole bunch of different accessibility testing tools as well. Silktide, really great organization that produced testing suites, and Jadu integrates with some of those as well. So we integrate with Silktide. So you can test content, for example, before you even publish it. And so some of the basics to get this right have been in place for a long, long time and are there, well established. It's not really a challenging mountain to climb for most organizations, because inevitably in any large organization, there's always someone passionate and enlightened about this. And sometimes those people come from the most unexpected places, right? So, our accessibility lead, or, I hope I'm not sort of letting all the good news out, but, potentially our head of accessibility in James came from our sort of user interface design team. And so you can find passionate people in your content teams, sometimes in your business, sort of frontline business teams, people who are passionate about accessibility. Maybe they have got a disability themselves. Maybe they know somebody with a disability and therefore are passionate about it. It's about investing in the right people. So if there's one word of advice I would give any leader right now is just seek out those people, put them in a position where they can have influence and get out of their way.
And that brings us on neatly to the point about it's coming across throughout this discussion very clearly as it's a culture change more than anything else in an organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so I totally agree with Suraj that if you've got, pockets of passion within your organization, then bring those together, leverage people's awareness of accessibility and lived experiences in many cases. We're firm advocates of leveraging the potential that you have within your ERGs or SIGs within your organization to help with, as an internal, informal, cohort, to be able to assist in the compliance and, real life usability goals that you have when it comes to digital. But it does need to be formalized. And the culture change comes when there is this kind of critical mass, internal comms, a commitment from the top, grassroots in terms of, a champions network, for example. Once you've got the hearts and minds, then I think you'll start seeing a shift in practice. You'll see better support. You'll see some budget being applied strategically and on an ongoing basis, not just kind of scattergun from the people that are the most passionate and loud about needing, some budget. And you'll see changes happening within the culture when the hearts and minds have been lit up. And then the numbers will speak for themselves afterwards. So I'd love it to be that way around, that the culture drives the agenda and then the numbers speak for themselves in the ROI, or in the case, reduced costs in terms of case management, the frontline support, all that sort of thing. So yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Finally, for those who've listened to our debate, what is the one thing somebody should go away within their organization and go and do today, this week? Suraj, I'll start with you if I may.
I mean, it absolutely comes to education from a leadership perspective, really understanding the business benefit of accessibility, not just to, your inclusion agenda, but also to your future technology agenda and being part of the whole AI revolution. So I'd say educate yourself, and then find those passionate people.
James?
In fear of stealing what I suspect Robin will say, I would definitely assess where you are at the moment, explore things like AbilityNet's digital accessibility maturity model, find out where you are, where you need to be, what you need to consider, and how what you need to implement to get yourself further along that roadmap, and tying in with what Suraj said before, and Robin, definitely the people as well. Find the people. You might already have them. They might be passionate already about accessibility, but through whatever blocker has been prevented from kind of moving forward. So yeah, find the people and put the processes in place. In getting a little bit outside of the one thing now, but internal resources, champion network, like you mentioned, and just removing blockers and barriers and letting them do what I suspect they will already want to do.
And last but not least, Robin.
Yeah, thanks, James. 100% stole what I was going to say. No
Sorry.
problem at all. Absolutely fine. So yeah, as James was saying, there are a lot of people who want to do the right thing. It is a complicated situation. There are lots of moving parts. There are lots of areas to consider, and just employing a maturity model process will really help. So abilitynet.org.uk/DAMM, DAMM. And you can download the whole pack. You can self-serve. You can go through the whole process, or you can get in touch with us if you want us to help with the process. I've been frankly embarrassed by the plugs and compliments that Suraj has paid AbilityNet. Really appreciate it. We have been working closely together with Jadu, and you guys absolutely are on the leading edge. I nearly said bleeding edge, but I think Suraj mentioned bleeding before in a negative context. So let's say the leading edge of accessibility in the public sector for decades now. I mean, we first met at least 2 decades ago. So, you've been absolutely brilliant. And as Suraj was saying, there are lots of people within the organization, and when they are leveraged, then you can do great things. And we've seen that with Jadu over the years in the benefits that their products and services have been providing to every single person within those local authorities on the ground, like myself, who otherwise would have extreme difficulties in doing really quite important things with their local authorities or whatever it might be. So yeah, huge thanks to Jadu. Keep up the good work. Thanks for asking me on. And if anyone wants to get in touch with AbilityNet for any of the things that we've been talking about, then that would be great too.
Robin, Suraj and James, thank you for sharing your insights with us. My name is Mark Chillingworth. It's been my pleasure to host this video. We're going to do a number of these over the course of the year, so please tune in again soon.